Hello everyone, welcome to Hopeful Moments 1. Today, we're diving into an emotional story about the burden of family responsibilities and the unfair sacrifices a sibling must endure when they have a family member with severe autism. This is not just one person's story, it's a reflection of the pressure, pain, and sense of neglect that many in similar situations may be silently enduring. Imagine being in the storyteller's shoes, a person who has lived in the shadow of their sister, where all the family's attention, love, and responsibilities are centered around her. The times they were forgotten, the dreams that were cast aside, the opportunities that were stolen away, all of it built up into an emotional storm that eventually erupted. The most shocking part of this story is the climax. It's the moment when the protagonist can't take it anymore and finally speaks up, unleashing all the suppressed pain they've carried for so long. But will this confrontation change anything? Will their parents listen? Will they finally understand? This story is more than just a family drama, it's a reminder of the importance of fairness and love, the necessity of listening, and the need to understand every member of the family, not just prioritize one person. If you find this story meaningful and thought-provoking, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more impactful stories. I know, the title might make me look terrible. It might sound like I'm heartless, cruel, or even selfish. You might think I'm just an ungrateful sibling who doesn't care about my family. But please, give me a chance to explain before you judge me. I have a sister with severe autism. If you've never lived with someone like that, you may never truly understand how much it affects my life. She needs constant supervision, almost 24/7. She can't be left alone, not even for a moment, because a single lapse in attention could lead to disaster. She can't communicate verbally, can't express her thoughts or feelings like others can. She can't take care of herself. Every meal, every bathroom visit, every bedtime routine requires assistance. But the worst part? The destruction and the violence. Even though she's only 12 years old, she's incredibly strong. When she has a meltdown, it's like a hurricane tearing through our home. She rips books apart, breaks furniture, smashes everything within reach. Sometimes, she even attacks people, scratching, pulling hair, even biting if someone tries to stop her. And in all of this, I'm the one who suffers the most. I don't hate her because she's autistic, I understand it's not her fault. But I hate how my life revolves around her, how my parents only care about her, and how I've been forgotten. Am I a bad person for feeling this way? Even at just 12 years old, she's already destructive and violent. Everything she touches gets ruined, torn apart, snapped in half, shattered. I've lost count of how many things in our house have been destroyed. I've watched her throw glass cups to the floor, rip my books to shreds, and tear my favorite shirt right in front of me. And no one can stop her. Her meltdowns are like a storm, and I'm the one always left to deal with the wreckage. It's not just objects being destroyed, I've become the target, too. She hits me, scratches me, even bites me. And every time it happens, the physical pain is nothing compared to the emotional pain. But the most painful part? My parents don't protect me. They only try to calm her down. I used to hope they would hold me, apologize to me, or at least acknowledge my pain. But no. All they care about is making sure she's okay. And I hate her for it. That sounds cruel. That sounds wrong. But I can't stop feeling this way. I know she doesn't do it on purpose. I know she doesn't understand. But understanding and feeling are two different things. How can I love someone who has taken everything from me? My freedom. My parents' attention. Even my childhood. I was only 6 years old when she was born, an age of innocence, of dreaming big, of running into my parents' arms just to be hugged and held. I was still just a child who wanted to be loved, to feel like I was the center of their world. But the moment she was born, everything changed. I was no longer the priority. The hugs became less frequent. The bedtime stories disappeared. If I fell, no one rushed to pick me up, because they were too busy with her. If I was happy, no one had time to listen to my excitement. If I was sad, no one asked me how my day was. At first, I didn't understand. I thought, maybe my parents were just busy for a little while. Maybe they'd come back to me when she got older. But as time passed, I realized the painful truth: it didn't matter whether I existed or not. Their whole world revolved around her. When I was 7 years old, I had to leave my own room. Not because I wanted to, but because she needed to sleep closer to our parents. I had no choice. No one asked me if I wanted to. No one cared how I felt. I could only pack my bags, hold my pillow, and quietly step down into the cold basement, which from then on would be my new bedroom. A room without natural light, surrounded by gray concrete walls, cold and lonely, just like the feeling inside me. I remember the first night sleeping there. The darkness engulfed me, swallowing every little corner of this unfamiliar room. Strange noises echoed from the walls, the hiss of water pipes, the clicking of the wind slipping through the cracks in the door, making me curl up under the thin blanket, trying to force myself to sleep while silent tears kept rolling down my cheeks. I was scared. I felt abandoned, like an unwanted outsider in my own home. But when I told my parents, when I choked on my words saying that I missed my room, that I was afraid of sleeping alone in the basement, they only patted my head and told me I had to understand. They didn't hold me in their arms, didn't comfort me, didn't say they understood how I felt. I was just a child, but that was the moment I realized I had to learn to endure. Not only that, but everything that belonged to me was no longer safe. All the things I loved, my dolls, toy cars, models, stuffed animals, one by one, they disappeared. Not in the way that a child outgrows their toys, but in the way they were mercilessly destroyed. She would throw them on the floor, stomp on them, tear them apart, snap them in half, or simply lose them. The things that once brought me joy were now just scattered, broken pieces on the ground, and all I could do was pick them up and helplessly watch as they could never be whole again. I remember one time, I spent an entire week building a Lego castle, the most beautiful castle I had ever made. Every brick carefully placed, every tiny detail meticulously crafted. When it was nearly complete, I excitedly ran to show my parents, my eyes shining with pride, hoping they would see it and praise me. But when I came back, everything was in ruins. The Lego walls had collapsed, the towers were shattered, and bricks were scattered everywhere as if a storm had swept through. I stood there, stunned. My heart sank to the bottom. I cried, I screamed, I yelled, hoping that at least this time, my parents would do something, protect me, protect what was mine. But all I got in return was a cold shake of the head and a bitter scolding. Your sister doesn't understand. Don't be selfish. In that moment, I realized that my feelings didn't matter. What right did I have to be sad? What right did I have to be angry? I was just invisible, a person without a voice. For the first time in my life, I felt so powerless and alone that it was suffocating. The years that followed, nothing ever changed. No matter how much I grew, no matter how much I tried to endure, no matter how many times I told myself I had to get used to it, she kept destroying the things that mattered to me. This time, it wasn't a toy. It wasn't a Lego castle that could be rebuilt. It was the MacBook my school provided me, the only tool I had for studying, connecting with friends, and having even a small piece of privacy in this suffocating world. I still remember the moment I walked into the room, my heart dropped into an abyss. The laptop lay there on the floor, shattered, the screen cracked into gray, jagged lines. The keys had been ripped off, scattered everywhere, some completely broken beyond repair. I felt like I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just an object. It was my future, my way to learn, the only thing I could truly call my own. And now, it was nothing but scrap. I burst into tears right then and there. It wasn't just anger or sadness, it was the years of helplessness finally erupting. I screamed, I yelled at the top of my lungs. Why? Why is it always me who has to endure? This time, I truly believed my parents would understand. I had hoped, just a tiny, fragile hope, that at least this time, they would take my side. But no! I was the one who got blamed. Why didn't you take better care of your things? Why did you let your sister get to it? Their words were like a cold blade stabbing straight into my heart. I had tried to take care of it. I had been careful. I had done everything I could to protect the little that still belonged to me. But in the end, I was still the one at fault, simply because I couldn't control someone that even they couldn't control. For the first time, I wondered, am I really their child? Do I really have the right to be loved? Or have I just been a shadow, an invisible person in this family all along? I had been waiting for protection. Just once, I wanted my parents to take my side. I wanted them to see me, to understand that I, too, had feelings, that I, too, had things that mattered to me. But no! Instead of comfort, instead of a hug, instead of even just a simple "we're sorry," all I got was blame. Why didn't you take better care of your things? That sentence was as cold as ice water splashed straight into my face. It wasn't just a simple scolding, it was a complete denial of my pain. I just stood there, frozen, while the tears kept streaming down my face. I realized that in my parents' eyes, every loss I suffered could be ignored, as long as she remained the priority. Maybe, if tomorrow I lost something else, my books, my phone, or even my dreams, they would still say, "Just let it go. Don't be so selfish." And that was when I started hating it all. I hated the unfairness, I hated the way I was always abandoned, I hated myself for ever trying to endure it. I no longer wanted to be the good child. I no longer wanted to sacrifice for a family that had never once seen me as important. For the first time in my life, I felt like I didn't belong here anymore. Not only was I pushed aside, but I was also bound to a responsibility I never chose. I am not just a forgotten child in the family, I have also been burdened with a duty I never agreed to. I don't remember when I first heard the words, "You're the older sibling, you have to give in to your younger sister/brother." Maybe it was when I was 7 and was forced to leave my own room. Maybe it was when I was 8, watching my favorite toy being destroyed, only to be told, "Don't be selfish." Those words repeated over and over, little by little, wearing away at my emotions. My parents never asked if I wanted to take care of her. They didn't care if I could handle it. They just decided, and I had to accept it. Since childhood, I was taught that taking care of her was my duty. That I had to sacrifice everything for her. That if my parents needed me, I had to be there immediately. No exceptions. No refusals. I wasn't allowed to have my own plans. I wasn't allowed to have an independent life. Whenever I wanted to go out, they would say, "You can go, but if anything happens, you must come back immediately." Whenever I spent time for myself, they would remind me, "You're the older sibling, you have to be responsible for your sister/brother." Gradually, I realized that I was no longer an individual. I had no right to decide my own life. I was no longer just a child, I was nothing more than a free babysitter. And the worst part is, no one ever realized that I also needed to be loved. I never had a normal childhood. When I was young, I used to dream of being like other kids, carefree, free-spirited, with no worries about anything. But I never had that privilege. While my peers excitedly planned picnics, I could only sit at home, waiting for orders from my parents. While they spent their afternoons playing basketball or joining their favorite clubs, I was stuck with a responsibility I never chose. I had no right to say no. Any personal plan of mine, no matter how small, had to come second to my responsibility to her. If my friends invited me to the movies, I couldn't be sure I'd be able to go. If I was invited to a birthday party, I had to hesitate. If someone suggested a trip out of town, I couldn't even dream of it. Because as long as my parents needed me, I had to give up everything. No matter how long I had waited for the event, no matter how much I had looked forward to that moment, the moment my parents called, I had to go back. And if I refused, I would be labeled as selfish. I would be scolded for not caring about my family. I would be punished, just like the last time, grounded simply for turning off my phone in a movie theater. I have never truly lived for myself. People always tell me, "You have to understand your parents," but has anyone ever tried to understand me? Even the rare moments I had for myself never really belonged to me. I once thought that at the very least, when I was in my room, wearing headphones, or simply sitting alone, I could have a little space of my own. But I was wrong. Because no matter where I went or what I did, my parents expected me to be ready to drop everything and return at any moment. I could never truly relax because I always had to be on standby. I could never fully enjoy a movie because I had to keep checking my phone. I could never have a complete conversation with my friends because at any second, I might be called home. As long as my parents called, I had to be there. No exceptions. No choices. Even if I was having fun, even if I was enjoying a rare moment of being myself, just one phone call and it would all be over. And if I dared to refuse, punishment would come immediately. Maybe it would be harsh words. You're so heartless. Family is more important than those silly things. We've sacrificed so much for you, and this is how you treat your sibling? Maybe it would be a clear punishment. I would be grounded for days. I would lose the few little things I could enjoy. I would be treated as if I were the one at fault, even though all I ever wanted was just a little time for myself. But what about me? My parents expect me to understand them. But has anyone ever understood me? The most recent example, and the final straw, was when I decided to spend just one evening doing something for myself. I had been waiting for the new Spider-Man movie for months. Not just because I loved it, but because it was one of the few things I could look forward to. This wasn't just a movie night, it was a rare moment of freedom that I had fought to claim. So when the movie started, I turned off my phone. Not because I was irresponsible. Not because I wanted to defy anyone. But simply because I wanted one peaceful evening, without any burdens on my shoulders. But when I turned my phone back on, dozens of missed calls from my parents filled the screen. I felt my heart sink immediately. I knew what was coming. And sure enough, the moment I stepped back into the house, a storm was already waiting for me. Why did you turn off your phone? What if something happened to your sister? You're so selfish. Don't you ever think about your family? No explanation was enough to convince them. No sympathy was ever given to me. And the result? I was grounded immediately. Stripped of the little freedom I had fought so hard to gain. Punished, just for daring to enjoy a peaceful evening. For daring to put myself first, even just once. Gradually, I realized a painful truth. I was no longer an independent individual. I had no right to live on my own terms. I was never allowed to prioritize my own needs, not even for a moment. I was just an extension of my parents. A backup plan. A free helper. A forced babysitter. And the worst part? I couldn't escape this cycle. Because every act of resistance only led to even worse consequences. I started to feel suffocated. Not just because of the growing responsibilities weighing on my shoulders, but because I saw no way out for myself. I began to wonder. Will I ever get to live for myself? Will there ever be a day when I can choose what I want to do without guilt or fear? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized the answer was probably no. Because I have never had a choice. I have never been allowed to put myself first. I have never been allowed to ask for anything. I have never been allowed to live as an independent person. I no longer feel like a member of this family. I am just an unconditional servant, someone who is always there when needed but never truly important. Everything revolves around her. Every plan, every priority, every ounce of attention. And me? I only exist on the sidelines of their lives. A faint shadow that no one notices. I had been waiting for that moment for so long. A rare moment where I felt like I mattered. Last week, my teacher chose me to give a speech at a big school event, an opportunity one was incredibly proud of. I was so excited to share the news with my parents. I was eager to see them proud of me, to receive the recognition I had longed for. And they promised to come. I believed them. I stood on that stage, my heart filled with hope. My eyes kept searching through the crowd, scanning hundreds of unfamiliar faces, looking for the ones I knew best. But I kept waiting. They never showed up. No message. No apology. No explanation in advance. Just one short reason given afterward. Your sister needed us. Once again, I was pushed aside. Once again, I was the less important choice. Once again, I realized that no matter how hard I tried, I would never be their priority. I waited for an apology, but it never came. They didn't even feel guilty. To them, this was just normal. No matter how important this milestone was for me, it could never compare to her daily needs. But this wasn't the first time. Every time I had something special, every time I needed them, the answer was always the same: she was more important. No matter how much effort I put in, no matter what I achieved, it was never enough for them to put me first. I have held in these feelings for so long. Day after day. Year after year. I told myself to endure, to be strong, to understand them. But today, it all exploded. When my dad and I talked about college, I thought, finally, this was a moment that belonged to me. We would talk about my future. About my dreams. About my choices. But then, he said something that shattered me completely. You should choose a high-paying major so you can take care of your sister when we're gone. At that moment, everything broke. Everything I had ever felt, ever hidden, ever tried to suppress for so many years. Exploded. This was the breaking point of all the pain I had endured for so long. All the times I was forgotten. All the times I was ignored. All the injustices I had forced myself to accept. They all poured into that moment of rage. I broke down in tears. I screamed. I shouted. I told them that everything in this family revolved around her. That I had never been seen as an independent individual. That I was nothing more than a free caretaker, a lifelong servant. I wasn't born to live my own life. I was born to serve someone else. After pouring out all the resentment I had suppressed for so long, I ran to my room and locked the door. I didn't know what I was expecting. An apology? An acknowledgement that I mattered too? But no! No one knocked on my door. No one checked on me. That silence said everything. I just sat there, silently crying, wondering. Am I a bad person for feeling this way? Am I wrong for wanting to be loved and cared for like a normal person? Am I selfish for wanting, just once, to be the priority? I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I can change anything. But there is one thing I now understand clearly. I am human too, and I deserve to be loved and valued. For years, I tried to endure, to tolerate, to convince myself that sacrifice was just natural. But today, I realize, no one is born just to live for others. Love cannot be forced. Sacrifice should not be an obligation. A family should be a place that nurtures and cherishes every member, not a place where one person is forgotten, treated like a shadow on the sidelines. I am not a bad person. I am just someone desperately seeking fairness, seeking the care and attention that I, too, deserve. And maybe, this is the moment I need to stand up and reclaim my right to live for myself. Everyone has their own worth, and no one deserves to be overlooked just because someone else needs more attention. Sacrifice only has meaning when it comes from willingness, not when it is forced. Putting yourself first is not selfish. Loving yourself is essential to being able to truly love others. If a relationship makes you feel suffocated and unfairly treated, you have the right to speak up. My life does not exist solely for someone else. I have the right to live for myself too. If you are feeling trapped in a situation like mine, forgotten, burdened with responsibilities, forced to sacrifice without a choice, remember that you, too, deserve love and respect. There is nothing wrong with wanting to be acknowledged. There is nothing wrong with feeling hurt when you are neglected. And there is definitely nothing wrong with wanting to live a life that belongs to you. Here are a few things you can do to regain balance. Speak up about your feelings, don't stay silent. Find a way to talk to your family or someone you trust. You have the right to be heard. Set personal boundaries, you can't carry everything on your shoulders. Learning to say no and prioritizing yourself is also an act of self-love. Seek support, if you feel overwhelmed, Don't hesitate to reach out to friends, teachers, or professional counselors. You are not alone. Pursue your own dreams. Your life cannot revolve around others forever. Find what truly makes you happy and don't abandon yourself for imposed responsibilities. You are not selfish for putting yourself first. You are not wrong for wanting to be loved. Remember, one day, you deserve to walk freely on your own path. Don't let anyone define your worth except yourself.